So you might have heard about enabling. You might have been told by somebody you're enabling, or you think you're an enabler. What we're going to talk about is understanding what enabling is. What does it look like? Are you enabling? And if so, I'm going to talk through quite a few tips on changing behaviours to stop enabling. So going from enabling to helping. It's quite a fine line. It's quite a subtle shift. So an example could be, people sometimes tell me, I've cleaned up his room, it was a right mess, I've cleaned it all so it's nice and tidy for him. And the thought process usually behind that, it comes from a place of love. You want to provide a nice environment for that person to sleep or to live. So it's done through care. So there's good intention there, but what happens is it starts to enable that person, because what you're doing is you're actually taking away responsibility from that person by you cleaning their room. So you're taking away their choice whether they clean their room or not, because you've done it for them. And then also, because you're cleaning their room, they've actually got a really nice cozy room. If they've been out drinking, using, they come home, they think, oh, lovely, I've got a nice clean room. I don't need to do anything because it's done for me. So where it is a good intention to try and help, it actually doesn't, and it allows that person to stay the same. So it's a subtle shift from trying to help to enabling. So what happens is when you're starting to enable somebody, what that means is it makes the addiction far, far easier to carry on with. It means that there's no consequences in the person's life. I've got a nice clean room. It's not a mess. It's lovely and clean. So happy days, I'm winning. So there's no discomfort there, because there's no consequences to that person's actions. There's no consequences to that person leaving that room in a state or a mess. So by enabling, you're making the addicted person's life easier to continue. And they've got no real reason to want to change, because that addiction is just dead easy to carry on with. So it's getting to a point of understanding what might you be doing. Now, this can sometimes be hard for families to acknowledge, maybe what I've been doing has been making it easier for that other person to keep using drugs, to keep drinking. That obviously is not your intention. I've never come across a family member where it's their intention to make the addiction any easier. That's not it. As I say, enabling is where somebody is trying to help, they think they're trying to help. A lot of the time it's due to fear and out of love to try and protect that person and get them to try and change. But as I'm saying, if we keep doing the same things, we're going to get the same results. So, a bit like the Bertie's box, we've got to try something different. So we've got to move from enabling to helping. And it might feel uncomfortable at first, because you're kind of going against maybe what's natural to you. It's sort of ruling your heart over your head a lot of the time. So it can be difficult. So I'm going to talk through ways to stop enabling, to move from enabling to helping. And one of the most important things to do, because I've just said it's challenging, it's a bit like putting your boundaries in, it's emotionally quite difficult to do. It's important to make sure you've got support yourself, be that from family or friends, but also getting support like a service from Hetties. So we support within the Nottinghamshire area. We can support people out of area as well. We have an offer for people who live outside of Nottinghamshire. Getting support from peers, so we have peer support groups, because they've all been through it. They've all been to that point where they've recognised that I've enabled, then they've realised I need to set boundaries, I need to detach with love. So peer support is really, really helpful in helping you to take that step to stop enabling. What you might also want to do in terms of looking for support is checking out ADFAM. So ADFAM, ADFAM, they're the national organisation for families affected by addiction. if you go onto the AdFam website, there's a little search bar and you can find support that's in your local area. And there's also Al-Anon. So Al-Anon is family groups for people affected by someone else's drug or alcohol misuse. Again, search Al-Anon, Al-Anon, A-N-O-N on Google, and you'll be able to find local meetings in your area. So really think about what support you've got, your support networks, finding support from other organisations that are specialising in substance misuse for families. So I'm going to rocket through quite a few different points here on how to stop enabling. This is something I would encourage you to keep revisiting because enabling can be really, really subtle. You know, as I say, we might be thinking we're doing something to help somebody, but it's until we start thinking about it a wee bit more, it's like, you know what, that's probably helping them to stay the same, okay? So, first big one is stop doing anything for your loved one that allows them to continue the way that they are currently living in. So, if you're working and paying all the bills, or if you're providing a roof over their head, a nice comfy bed, if you're giving them food, cooking them meals, that's another really, really subtle one. Where somebody might be living at home, they're not paying board money, but you're providing them food, you're cooking them a meal at the end of the day. That's making it easier. It's really, really subtle, but it's again making it easier for them to stay as they are and to stay addicted for longer. So thinking about what things could I be doing here in terms of providing for them that sort of practical support. And you might actually be providing a safety net for them. Sometimes hard, but it is about removing that safety net so that they can feel the consequences of their actions. And once they start to feel the consequences of their actions, they might then think about changing, about considering recovery. Next thing, so don't help the person do anything that they could, would, or should be doing if they weren't drinking or using drugs. So for example, if somebody's, say they've lost their driver's licence and you're taking them to AA or NA meetings, any recovery meeting, that could be a form of helping because they wouldn't be able to get to those meetings themselves. In an ideal world, if they've got the money, maybe if they could look at getting a taxi, getting bus, tram, walking. But you might, if it's far away, you might offer to give a lift, okay? On the flip side of that, where it falls into enabling is if you are finding all the groups that are available in that person's area, if you're looking, how do they get the driver's license back, if you're finding jobs for them and applying for them, jobs for them, that again is taking responsibility away from them and it's making it easier for them to stay exactly as they are, okay? Next part, which is really important and sometimes difficult, but is don't make excuses or cover up their behaviour. So if you're at a social event and the person is maybe acting up, or they're being quite loud, don't smooth over that interaction and let them deal with the consequences of that by themselves. Don't take on responsibility of that. What sometimes families might do is if your loved one, say, it is hungover or they're not in a place where they're able to go to work, some families will ring up and they'll explain they've got a tummy bug, they're under the weather, they're not feeling well, so they'll cover for them. But that's a conversation that your loved one needs to have with their employer themselves. Sometimes folk will turn around and say, well, what if they lose their job? I've got the bills to pay. But actually, that's maybe what it's going to take for your loved one to change where they do lose their job. Don't take any responsibilities or duties that your addicted loved one should be doing. So, are you doing all the chores in the house? Are you looking after the kids all the time? Are you doing things that usually they would be doing when they're sober? So where possible, ask your loved one, can you do this? Can you do that? Rather than just taking it on and doing it automatically yourself because you think, oh, they're not going to do it. Push it back. Keep asking that person, can you do this? really, really important one. So don't give money or loan money to your loved one for any reason, really. Now, this one can be difficult for families sometimes when you've got your loved ones saying, I've got drug dealers that are after me if I don't pay them this amount, okay? And I've had it many times where families have paid countless drug debts off. What you can see there is that person isn't learning because they're still getting themselves into debt, okay? They're not recognising this isn't helping them, and they're not recognising that as well because you keep paying the drug debt off. Now, enabling, as I say, usually comes from a place of fear. So when your loved one is saying to you, I've got this drug debt, they're going to come after me, that's going to go straight onto your fear response. Take a moment before you respond to that other person, and tell them clearly, I need some time to think this through before I can give you an answer. Now, there might be situations where you do feel you need to pay that debt back. There is no right or wrong answer here, okay? But where you are repeatedly paying debts, that's when you need to start asking yourself, what's working here, what's not? Does something need to change? And again, it's the consequences of that person's choice, not yours, okay? But in terms of not giving money, so again, it can be really subtle. So people will say to me, I've stocked up their fridge, so they've got a nice fridge full of food. 9 times out of 10, I hear as well, that food just goes to waste, it doesn't get eaten. So then you feel that resentment of, I've put all that food in that person's fridge and they've not touched it. Stop doing it. Because if you're putting food in the fridge, that's then more money that can be used for drugs and alcohol. If they're saying I need money for electricity, they have to go without then. Your money as well is your money. If you've worked for it, if you've earned it whatever way, that's your money, okay? For you to spend on yourself. So whenever they're asking for money, whatever reason it might be, if you're knowing that they're not in recovery, don't give them money, okay? Don't give your loved one any cash, no matter what they're saying it's for, okay? Because again, that's another way of making it easier. And then also kind of reassessing your financial relationship. So if you've maybe got a joint account and your loved one's taking the money out of the joint account and they're maybe not putting anything into it, consider setting up separate accounts so that you know if you've got bills to pay, that's covered and nothing else is getting taken out of that. And also try and avoid sort of buying any extravagant gifts. It might be somebody's birthday. If it's their birthday, maybe take them out for a bit of lunch or something, or doing something where it's not money that you're giving, or something that could then be sold. Another thing to really think about, and this is a little bit like the one around not giving money for drug debts, but letting the law and the police do their job. So your loved one, they might steal, they might drive under the influence, they might be caught in possession of drugs, worse, anything. Now, a legal consequence is sometimes like the harshest that could come, but sometimes is the most important. Nobody wants a criminal conviction, nobody wants to go to jail, have a record or anything like that, but the law can't be manipulated. And sometimes that is the consequence, although severe. Maybe that's what it's going to take for your loved one to shift in the way of the way they're thinking. So avoid then stepping in. If you can see that legal consequences could be on the way, avoid then stepping in to smooth that over. Allow your loved one to experience that, because that might be what helps that person to go through that process of change, okay? Next part is to not rescue your loved one and not rush in to deal with crises. Rescuing might actually just be a way of satisfying your own needs. And I'm not saying that in a way of being judgmental, but it's something, if you look back at the drama triangle video, where we're either the perpetrator, the rescuer, or the victim, unless we're away from that drama triangle, we're one of those 3 roles, okay? So if you notice that you are the rescuer, take a step back from that. Pause before you react, okay? Because it's not really going to help the person to change in the long term. It's just putting pillows underneath them to soften that fall, and they never really feel the pain of their actions. Again, there's no consequences there. Another point that might be quite a subtle way of enabling is don't argue, plead, scold, or anything like that, beg with your loved one, because if their behaviour has impacted you and all you give is kind of a bit of a verbal disagreement, it's not that much really. Yes, it might make it a bit unpleasant for a time, but what can also happen is if you're reacting to that person's latest behaviours, right, what that does then is gives that person a reason to react to your reaction. So what can often happen is somebody will say, well, if you didn't have a go at me, I wouldn't have went out and used, so it's your fault that I've used. Then what happens is, well, I feel guilt, I feel that is my fault, I shouldn't have done that. And then you go and try and make it up to the other person, and you make excuses, you make allowances. If you can stay silent, carry on as normal, that person just has to sit with their own actions themselves, their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own behaviours. You haven't responded, so you're not giving them anything to respond or react back to. Okay, so it's not giving them any excuse to use again. The other thing, it might sound like an obvious thing, but is sometimes when families become a little bit disconnected, you want to try and maintain that relationship in any way possible, and sometimes folk might drink or they might use drugs, but also it's a way of kind of trying to understand what's going on for that person, why are they using this substance, but at all costs avoid that where possible. Another thing that I've touched on already at the beginning, but it's about setting your boundaries with your loved one and sticking to them. So if you're saying to somebody, if you don't quit drinking, I'll leave, that's just an ultimatum and it's a threat. But if you're saying to somebody, I won't have drinking in my home, you're setting a clear boundary there of what you're willing to tolerate and put up with and what you're not, okay? So, talk through quite a lot of points there of things to think about, stuff that you might be doing, but you're going to aim to stop doing these things. You're going to aim to change some of that behaviour. So what's really important to do is talk about that. Talk about that shift that is about to occur, so that the other person is aware of kind of what's happening and why you're doing it. So some tips about that. Where you're going to have a conversation with your loved one, do it at a time when they're sober. That could be if it's first thing in the morning, earlier on in the day, whatever that might look like. Find the time when they're sober. Emphasising that these changes come from a place of love, and not out of revenge or punishment or anything like that. And it's about that desire to change, okay? What you might want to do there is using open-ended questions to try and help your loved one to understand that the substance misuse is impacting the family and it's causing quite a few issues that the family are facing, okay? And staying positive, being really clear. It goes back to that video around boundaries, maybe watching that one as well as this one will be helpful, being really clear on why you're changing your behaviour, because it's going to resist any urges to sort of fight back, or if your loved one is coming back with anything, you can just be really clear and say, what, this comes from a place of love. I want you to get help. I want to have you in my life, but I cannot continue enabling in this way that I have been. So what's an important thing here is about making sure everybody within the family, friends, whoever is around that person, you're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Because again, like I said about with the boundaries video, your loved one, wherever they're going to, they need to get the same approach. They need to get the same response back, as a case of no, I will not do that, or drinking is not allowed in my home, drug use is not allowed in the home. They need the same response wherever they go. So work together, work in a team, you and your family, to be singing off the same hymn sheet, okay? And then the last point is, once you've gone through that, continue to emphasise about the importance of support for your loved one, and getting maybe some treatment around their drug and alcohol use. So what I've talked through there is ways that you can stop enabling and turn that into helping. You know, families will often say to me, I don't know what to do, what do I need to do? What can I do to help my loved one? It's often not a case of what you do, it's what you don't do. It's what you stop doing. And it's that sort of thing, is like less is more when you're trying to help your loved one, okay? So once you've stopped doing that, you've changed that behaviour, you've removed that enabling system for your loved one, it might force them, it might push them in that direction to want to seek help, because they're experiencing consequences, that they're really facing the harsh reality of their addiction. There is no cushions, there is no safety net, there is nothing propping them up to make it easier. They're on their own to deal with all all the consequences of that addiction, okay? So, might encourage them, but it might not. There's no guarantee that your loved one is going to enter into treatment and into recovery. So that can be hard to accept, but it's about recognising, I have done everything that I possibly can to help my loved one. There is only so much that I can do within my control. There's only so many choices that I can take to help somebody to change, okay? But they are ultimately in control of their own choices, their own behaviours, okay? So we can't control what somebody else is doing, but we can set boundaries and we can take care of ourselves. And that in turn, most often, does bring about some change from your loved one. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I would encourage you to rewatch this video and keep thinking about all those subtle wee ways that you might be just propping your loved one up, but also talk it through. So either getting support from a service like us, or having a look on AdFam for some support within your area. I think is really, really important, and it helps you to maintain that behaviour change, okay? So thank you for watching, and I hope you found this helpful. Perhaps check out the video on boundaries and also the drama triangle too. Take care.